right, well, let's get to talking about some of these tanking teams in the NBA. So, I asked you, it was either last week or a couple weeks ago, if we could do a segment about the youngest teams in the NBA, in particular, the teams that are tanking but have young stars on them, uh, and talk about their sort of progress when it comes to the development of the young stars on their team, and we could talk about like where their teams sit. And so the way I wanted to go about this was to talk a little bit about the very best super young teams in the NBA and then compare these tanking teams to those very best teams and talk about where they are on that sort of trajectory or if they're just not even close. But first, I wanted to get your thoughts sort of generally about what I think are the three best very young teams in the NBA. That is obviously Oklahoma City Thunder have to be there. And I believe they are the youngest team in the NBA, also sitting at first place in the Western Conference right now. We have the Houston Rockets, which really turned their team around last season when they added Ime Udoka and a couple of vets. And of course, my Orlando Magic, who unfortunately recently suffered a terrible spate of injuries where both Paolo and now Franz Wagner have torn their right obliques. But up until this point, they were looking like the brightest young team in the Eastern Conference, frankly. And they're currently sitting at third there, too.
Right. Yeah, no, I'd agree with those three. Those are like the teams that look like well, obviously the Thunder are in insane shape, and they have room to fiddle with whatever they want to do. And the Rockets even have some options, right? Like they could trade some people depending on who doesn't work out, but it seems like they're kind of buying into Şengün as well, which is cool.
And Şengün's buying into the defense. Like his defense has been really, really good this year, and Ime isn't benching him as much at the end of games, which I think is very good.
That's a good sign
from Ime, and it's also a good sign for Şengün.
Yeah, because if he was doing that, I would be like, yeah, Ime probably was right in that benching.
I don't necessarily think Ime is right. I don't think he was necessarily right to do that last year. It didn't always work out. It usually doesn't, actually.
He's establishing himself as a no-nonsense coach, whatever the hell. So, so we're going to kind of compare these teams that are, building their way towards hopefully being one of these teams who are improving, and being at the top of the league if they can.
All right, let's talk about the Spurs since we're on here, because they're on a more accelerated trajectory than I expected. Because coming into this season, I thought that they would have really no chance at a play-in spot. I still believe that because I think they will shut things down at some point this season. But because of the faltering of a few teams like the Sacramento Kings, in particular, the Spurs find themselves on the cusp of a play-in spot, depending on how the rest of the Suns and the Wolves and the Lakers seasons go, for example. What do you think of the moves that they made this summer, in particular adding Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes next to Wemby? Because I'm not going to lie, my eye test tells me that like Wemby's development is being not as fostered as I thought it would be with Chris Paul there.
You would hope that whatever Victor learns from Chris Paul and even Harrison Barnes, it pays off like a little later too. Like I think it's just going to take a little bit of time. I think with all these teams, one of the first things that they need is like a true star. If you have someone who's super good on an NBA team, you're going to be well positioned for the most part. And then it's just about filling out the pieces. So it's like, it's not surprising to me that the Spurs, who should be a tanking team or who might still be, are pretty good because they got Wembanyama. Like, he's a huge floor raiser.
Like a couple of like decent vets around him.
Yeah. And Chris Paul, like 35% from three. He just doesn't have a lot of attempts, like, hunting a mid-range that he's kind of known for, which is interesting. He leading 8.5 assists. That's what you want to bring him in to do. From that sense, it's good, getting the ball moving and like getting people looks.
Guess who leads the Spurs in on-off this season?
Is it Chris Paul?
It is Chris Paul.
You got to get him organized.
They're 16 points per 100 better with him on the floor than off.
Yeah, I mean, what are they ranked? 20th in offense and 18th in defense. It's like a good middle-of-the-road team, which is, I guess, if you're trying to improve where you want to be as the Spurs and like in the hunt for a playoff spot, but it's like, when are they going to take?
I think they have some other people's picks too, so maybe there's not as much urgency to tank with their own picks, especially if it means stifling Victor's development. Let me double check. Yeah, this draft. Oh my gosh. They have their pick, obviously. They have the Hawks pick from the DeJounte Murray trade. They own the Hornets pick. Oh no, it's top 14 protected, so the Hornets are going to get to keep that. They have the Chicago Bulls pick and it's only top 10 protected. And right now, the Bulls, I think, might be too good because they're sitting at 400. Yeah, they're too good right now. They're not
So
going to
they
be in the top
could
10.
they could
So,
get that.
and the Bulls like never tank even when it like makes sense.
We'll see what happens after the trade deadline and
True.
what the Bulls do.
I
But
mean, we saw what they did last year. They kept Caruso and then, got giddy with him. So that's something.
But they got enough there to like do something. Vassell is like a pretty good player offensively, although he's hasn't played as many games this season. So
I think it's interesting that we started with those three really young teams in the Thunder, the Magic, and the Rockets because each of them is very good in a different way, and they also got there in a different way, like in terms of like what makes them good. The Thunder obviously like just hoarded the hell out of a bunch of draft picks, and now they just have like the best lottery picks ever. They also had some misses in there, of course, and they've like traded some guys away, but they have like such a big cache of picks that it doesn't matter. And they have these offensive superstars in Shea and J-Dub. And then J-Dub and Chet also are like great defensively, and they surrounded those guys with like great defenders, right? The Rockets, like they didn't know what Şengün was going to be. And we know that because they were reportedly pursuing Brooke Lopez, not this summer, but last summer. In free agency, in addition to all of the other vets that they added to be these defensive pieces. But they brought in all these vets to come in, be adults in the room, and like take games seriously because that Houston Rockets team was, disgusting. And then the Orlando Magic, they're just like this crazy young team that have these two superstar wings that they've built out around them. And then they surrounded them mostly with defenders, but then there's also some guys like a Caleb Houston that's like, you can maybe shoot sometimes and just kind of play basketball. There's a reason that they're not a great offense. They don't have a point guard, but they're this great defensive team. But they rely more on like their young, awesome defenders as opposed to the Rockets that relied on bringing in all these vets to be this great defensive team. And so I sort of wonder which of those three teams do you think the Spurs are like on the trajectory of? Because I sort of see them as like closer to like an Orlando Magic than like a Rockets. Like I don't think at any point they're going to bring in a bunch of vets to like get serious, quote unquote, all of a sudden.
yeah.
Even like they added a few this year, like marginally, but it wasn't because like they didn't look like the Houston Rockets did 2 years ago, where you're like, what is going on with this organization, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be like the Rockets where, they're having a new coach or making a huge trade like for Van Fleet or, and they're just because they're more like certain about the guys that they have. There's like less questions like with Jalen Green and Şengün. Like it's like more clear.
Well, Jalen Green, is it clear?
No, that's what I'm saying is that the Spurs are more clear than the Rockets.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, at least in Victor.
Yes, in Victor.
I mean, Vassell, they felt comfortable enough to give him that extension last year, even though he's struggling with some like coming back from injury things.
It's like the top player's clear. It's like worse when the top player's not clear, like Şengün and Jalen Green or whatever. So it's like, I think they'll be more, I hate to say it, but I kind of think of them like almost like a Thunder team.
That's interesting because the Thunder obviously brought in their top player from another trade, and then he's kind of older than everybody else.
Yeah.
And then he's got these like really like fresh young talents around him. But I guess if you wait a few years for Wemby, like he will be older than guys they bring in. So that's totally possible.
So it's like maybe they draft some really good players and Victor's like a young superstar like Shea and he's like dominating. But I also could see them like the vets are going to want to go play around Victor. Like he's a crazy archetype of a player. So I don't know what direction the Spurs are going to go in terms of that, but just sometimes harder to trade for big players. So building through the draft seems pretty viable right now if you can do it right. And if the Spurs have some like high picks or whatever, they could start building and like be a team like the Thunder with a horde of young players. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So let's move on to the East then, because I don't want to talk about the Utah Jazz right now. I think they're just a little too young for me to really say with your young players. I will say
Yeah.
they have been a lot worse this year than even I thought they would be.
Yeah, same.
All right, then let's move on to a team that was like maybe one of on track to being one of the worst teams in NBA history last year, and the Detroit Pistons. I think that JB Bickerstaff has done a pretty good job over there at just making them look like a respectable bad NBA team.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, it helps that they remade some of the roster. They let go of Killian Hayes. They brought in some guys that can shoot, and Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley. They brought in Tobias Harris, who was apparently like a good locker room guy too. But JB Bickerstaff, I think, has them playing much better. Just like not good, but like really connected defense that I didn't expect to see, even from oh, this is a massively improved team. They're ranked 17th defensively right now when you adjust for their strength of schedule. Last year, the Pistons were 25th with a substantially worse defensive rating as well. But just in terms of where they rank in the league, I think that that's crazy because you're like, well, what's their defensive personnel? Right? I
Mhm.
mean, Cade has been better this year. Like he's making some defensive plays, but he's not a good defender. Jalen Duren is not a good defender. He can rebound though. Probably Isaiah Stewart deserves a lot of
Defensive
the
credit.
credit for this. Yeah, for sure. I haven't watched a ton of Pistons games this year, but I have watched them play the Bucks. I watched them play the Lakers as well. And Isaiah Stewart is more versatile defensively than I really would have thought because he's kind of an undersized big, but he actually plays pretty good drop defense for an undersized big. They don't actually switch with him a ton, but him playing drop is pretty good. And also he rebounds and all that stuff. Mostly with him, it's like, can you stay on the floor by not accumulating technical fouls?
Yeah, he's an aggressive guy. As we saw him.
Right. But they had him last year and they were still a really bad defense. So something about JB
Well,
Bickerstaff's
yeah,
message or scheme or whatever
organizing and
and organizing and keeping everybody else like
mhm.
do your part. Like I will take care of like the main stuff, but can you do your part? Can you like kind of stay in front of guys or at least funnel them into the right places?
I,
And so, that leaves them with a 17th ranked defense, which is like we talked about. If you're in the like 20 range for a tanking team, that's pretty good. I think 17th is
yeah,
awesome
it's
for the
starting to be
Pistons.
questioning whether you're tanking or not at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, like they have like some shooters on the team. I mean, Malik Beasley, I don't like him as you know, but hey, look at him. He's 41%. He's lighting it on fire.
Do you
Um,
not like him because the Nuggets had to trade him, or do you not like him because the Lakers had to let him go?
I don't like him because off court issues, as well as
Yeah.
when he came to the Lakers, he absolutely sucked. And then and then he went to the Bucks and like was really good at shooting again. And then was in a 3-point contest. Give me a break. But he's good at shooting. Cade is shooting really well from three. That's cool.
That helps a lot,
He sucks at
right?
finishing around the rim in like his 2-point game, but like he's improving. And I did hear the Hardwood Knocks guys talking about Caden. They were giving him a lot of credit for his rim defense, like just
He's been
contesting at the
blocking some
rim.
shots. Those are the plays
Yeah.
I was referring to. I just think that he's still kind of like on the perimeter. I think he can let guys blow by him sometimes and just kind of
Hmm.
Luca-esque, just kind of give up on that play sometimes.
Well,
But that's probably happening less frequently this year than it was last year, to be fair.
and even Jaden Ivey is like hitting more shots, like
He's
with
also
low
playing,
volume
like
and
he's starting
playing.
instead of coming off the bench or not playing at all, like Monty
Yeah.
Williams had him. No, I actually think more about the Rockets model, to be
Yeah.
honest, because I don't see Cade as a Franz or Paolo
Yeah.
level player, but you could see like a vision of a team with like, okay, now we have a serious coach and we surround these guys with a bunch of like defensive vets that can kind of create a little bit more margin for error for Cade on the offensive end. If we could just be like that, like good connected defensive team, and then we just kind of like muck it out from there. So I think that would be kind of interesting,
Hmm.
especially for Detroit. Like you see them as a team where they've been like so bad for so long. At some point, even if they own their picks, they're just like, okay, we just kind of have to be better than we have been right now because we keep getting the fifth overall pick. in the lottery, and it's not worth it to keep tanking like this. So let's just try to be serious and like be a good team.
Yeah, and kind of luck
Um,
into a Shangoon to pair with your talented guard. Oh,
yeah, yeah. Especially now that they've got at least theoretically like a better guy in charge of their scouting department now that they have Trajan
yeah.
Langdon instead of Troy Weaver.
Yep.
I just realized they both have TR names. Interesting. All right. Well, if you have watched to this point, thank you so much. You probably are subscribed if you have watched to this point. But if you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. And if you like our content, please remember to hit the like bell. Please share our show. We're trying to grow the channel. We're excited for, the holiday slate is going to be interesting in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to be talking about the NBA Cup next week. So we'll have some more interesting games to discuss. And who knows, the Nuggets might surprise us in the next few weeks and start to turn things around. And if they're not, come here for the rants because they will be here. Trust me. Please hit the notification bell and leave us a review. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at What's in a Game NBA. We also have links for all those socials in the description. We also have our clip channel at What's in a Game NBA Clips. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks. It really sucks.